Welcome back, traders. It's October 7th, 2024, and today I want to talk about a trade that I had taken on NVDA and QQQ. I want to talk through what I saw, why I had taken those trades, and kind of give it into what I had looked at when the market first opened. I took a look at futures on Sunday, and I noticed something that could suggest some downside. So let's get into it. First off, let's expand the ES chart, okay? Now, on my screen here, I have, as I usually have, SPY, QQQ, ES, and NQ. Those are the four that I'm always looking at to get a good sense of what the market is doing. I also look at NVIDIA and Apple as well on my second tab there. But let's focus on these four right now. Specifically, we're going to talk about ES. So yesterday, when the futures started trading again, yesterday Sunday, um, first off, I'll talk about this bearish fair value gap that we opened up in. Now, uh, this red line here at the top represents the very top or the edge of the 30-minute bearish fair value gap. Okay, so as you can see here, I use the volumized fair value gap indicator to mark out all of the fair value gaps. And we have a 30-minute fair value gap here. Okay, now uh, we were opening up in that fair value gap, and I wanted to see when I took a peek yesterday at futures if we were going to be able to break over this fair value gap and continue higher. Now, one thing I'll mention is if we go back to Friday, all right, one thing I noticed on Friday is if we go to the lower time frame on Friday, uh, right before we closed, we saw a move to the upside. Okay, and this is just something that I observed right before the market had closed, is that moving into this fair value gap area, right, on the 30-minute. Okay, so we can see here that we're in the fair value gap here on ES. Okay, we're in the fair value gap on SPY as well. Okay, this purple just represents the high of day on Friday, which I have marked out. Um, so that's what that is. Don't look at this as being a key level as of Friday. This was just marked out today, this morning, when I did my charting. But in any event, we're in a fair value gap. Now, look at the volume, right? So one thing I did notice on Friday was that on QQQ, on ES, on all basically all of them, right? We have this fair value gap, but look at the volume, right? So what does that mean? Well, there was a big push to the upside, right? So we see this previous candle here. Let me expand SPY. We saw this, pretty big move up, right? And then we moved into this fair value gap on SPY and ES. But to look at the volume, right? What's important is the volume. Now, what I just happened to notice is because, given the fact that we moved into this bearish fair value gap, the amount of volume suggests that if there were a lot of buying pressure, I would expect to have seen this candle be very, much bigger than it was and a longer candle to the upside. Same thing with ES. When the market closed, just before market closed, with us moving into this bearish fair value gap, again, same thing, right? We see the volume that was created in this large move, this large candle, but this is an extremely high amount of volume, right? The highest candle of the day, you know, highest volume bar of the day. Uh, and we didn't make that much progress to the upside, right? A big wick to the upside, on the top of that candle, which suggests that there's a lot of selling pressure up in this area. Okay. Now, again, remember we have this 30-minute fair value gap up there, so we're moving into this fair value, and there's actually two fair value gaps, as a matter of fact. I think there's one. I think there was one on the hourly. Um, I don't recall. That's what these two lines represent, is it's a median of a fair value gap. But in any event, we didn't make a lot of progress, right? So that just told me that even on this 5-minute candle, you can see this type of candle on the 5-minute chart, is that with that amount of volume, if there were a lot of buying pressure that exceeded the selling pressure, we would have seen a different type of candle, right? So just going by what I saw on Friday, that suggested that there was a lot of selling pressure up there, okay? Now, let's fast forward to Sunday, okay? So now when we look at Sunday, or let's move forward a bit here, right? Let's go into Sunday now, and let's take a look at what we saw here, right? So now Sunday, when we started trading on the futures, remember we still have this edge of this fair value gap. What I noticed on the hourly is that we failed to close over it. Now, again, Friday, we knew that we were unable to get over this level and close over this level, so we knew that there was a lot of selling pressure up there. But when I took a peek at the futures on yesterday, I noticed that for the 2 hourly candles, we failed to get over that. So there's two things that I just observed is that these 2 hourly candles failed to close over that level. Number one, right? Again, this line being the edge of the fair value gap, okay? And then two is that on this, we also noticed that using the volume delta candle indicator that I use, this black horizontal line represents where all the trading activity was. And all the trading activity was at 5,806.50. That's above price, right? Current price is down here. This is where all the trading activity was. What does that tell me? Well, with this type of bearish, rejection candle of a very key area, tells us that they're selling. There's a lot of trading activity, selling activity because it's above the price. So I don't trade futures, so this didn't really mean much to me, but I just took a look at the futures to see what they're doing, and the fact that we rejected that area twice on two consecutive hourly candles told me that we would likely wake up this morning with some downside. Now, that doesn't guarantee that that's going to happen, but that was just an observation and a note in my head that one, based on what I saw on Friday, that we failed to get over that level and we saw extremely high volume told me that there was selling pressure. And then Sunday, we see that we failed to get over that level, okay? And now we're breaking down. So when we woke up this morning, we saw this major downside move. Okay, now let's look at the rest of the tickers here. So what did we do? So we gapped down. There's a big move to the downside. Okay, and that created a gap. Well, actually, it created two things, right? One is it created an overnight gap. Two is it created a bearish fair value gap. Okay, on the hourly. So now we're on the hourly chart right here. We can see that the indicator now displays a bearish fair value gap on SPY and QQQ. The other thing of importance is this overnight gap. So the blue area that I have represented on my chart is a overnight gap area, a gap zone, an overnight price gap. And what that represents is, as your futures continue to trade, this is the gap between the end of after hours trading on Friday and the opening of pre-market this morning for QQQ and SPY. So it gapped down because futures had made a downside move. Okay, so this is a gap area. Now that gap area, price can tend to move back into that area and fill the gap left from that overnight trading. It can reject the gap as well. So sometimes price will enter that gap, reject, and that would signal, because there was a downside gap, we gap to the downside, that if it rejects that area, that just signals, strong selling pressure. Okay. And then price would just continue to the downside, right? We would just see continuation to the downside. So this morning, as I assess the market, what do I notice? Okay. So if I look at where we are right now, let's just talk about QQQ specifically, right? Let me just expand QQQ. What do I see? Now let's kind of reassess. Remember what we saw on Friday. We saw a lot of selling pressure in that general area up above, right? And that was selling pressure from an ES and SPY bearish fair value gap. That's number one. Number two is that yesterday, on Sunday, we failed to get over that level, and that created a downside move. The third thing is that we have a gap now, which price tends to move into, and if it rejects, then we can see further continuation to the downside. And then we have the bearish fair value gap as well. So when I assess the market in the morning, I have to understand where we are. Well, we know previous day high is here, previous day low is here. We're in a bearish fair value gap, and we don't have any real heavy, bullish fair value gaps except for this 570 here that was created this morning, I believe, um, on this upside move. But that's irrelevant, right? Because the way I have to assess the market in the morning is that we're opening up in a bearish fair value gap. So my rules say that I'm not going to long into a supply level. I'm not going to long into a bearish fair value gap, right? Just like I don't short into a level of demand or a bullish fair value gap. Now, because we're opening up in a bearish fair value gap, that doesn't mean that we just, you know, short the market without waiting to see what happens. We just, market opens and we're buying shorts. That's a crazy thing to do, right? Now, we could see immediate, selling pressure and price just drop down, $6 at open, but that's not, and we could catch that, and make a 100%, 200% trade, but that's not the way that I like to teach those who I teach how to trade. We want to, let the market, open up, let let price do its thing. And if price moves to the downside aggressively and we don't catch that, that's fine because that move down is going to create another fair value gap, and then we wait for price to move back into that level, and then we look to take a trading opportunity off of that. Just like this morning, right? In pre-market, we moved to the downside. It created a fair value gap, which that would be represented as an opportunity, right? And then we wait for price to come back into that level, and then we look to take the short for a continuation trade to the downside. Okay, so that's the mentality that we want to have is that, if we see big moves, let's not worry or be concerned or, wish or stress the fact that we didn't catch that downside move. That downside move creates opportunity. So this morning in pre-market, it created a downside move. It created a fair value gap, and we wait for price to go back into that. Now we opened up in that, but again, we don't want to just take a short position just because we opened up in that area. So what am I looking for? Well, at market open, I was specifically looking for a move into this gap area. Again, now that gap area is an area where we can see price move into and reject for a move lower. I specifically was looking for a move into this gap on QQQ and or SPY and then close back below the median of this 1 hour fair value gap. That's the trade I was looking for. Now, why was I looking for that? Well, experience has told me that I've seen this type of move before where we have two key areas very close to each other that, we longs would likely get caught in this type of trade. They see the market open, price moves to the upside. They're not realizing that there's a overnight gap here. Uh, selling kicks in, we wick back below this bearish fair value gap, and we move aggressively to the downside. That's specifically what I was looking for. Now, I took two scalp trades off of that level, and I don't want to focus specifically on those trades. We're going to fast forward a little bit to the more important trade that I take it. Now, I did take QQQ puts at 8:30 Mountain Time. All the times I mention on this channel are all in Mountain Time. So 10:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 Mountain Time. I took two QQQ puts, and the reason why I took QQQ puts is because I saw some selling pressure in this gap area. So I had taken QQQ puts at 8:30, quick scalp, and then I had taken some more QQQ puts again at 9 a.m. Price moved down. I had taken profits. I had held a couple runners on those, but the real trade was um, later on in the morning. Okay, so let's kind of talk about that. Now, before I go further, I want to talk about NVIDIA for a second, right? So if we look at NVIDIA, let's look at where we are in NVIDIA, right? We opened up right below previous day high. So previous day high is this level here at 124. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. We can see that we have an overnight gap area down here at 119, 120 area, and then we have this 130 4-hour bearish fair value gap. Now, I wasn't specifically looking for price to move into that level today until I started seeing NVIDIA just go straight up. Okay. And as we started approaching that area, that's when I started paying attention to it because this bearish fair value gap looked to be pretty heavy. We can see it's an area of a pretty big area of supply. We've seen aggressive moves to the downside once it entered that area. So there's two areas that I was really interested in as we moved into that is that we have this 130.30 area and then we have this 131.13.15 area, right? This area, this 131.13.15 area is an overlap of fair value gaps. We can see that there's two different fair value gaps showing up on the chart here. We have one that starts down here, and then we have a second one that starts at this 131, 20 area, 15 area, whatever, right? What's important there? Well, or what area is more important? Well, either or both, because this 130 is the edge of the fair value gap. When price reaches that level or comes into that area, I'm going to be looking for selling pressure to kick in. I'm going to look for high volume rejection candles, and I would look to take a short on NVIDIA or look to take a short on QQQ, right? If NVIDIA moves into very key levels, whether it's a bullish fair value gap, bearish fair value gap, another overnight gap, whatever it is, QQQ is likely going to react, okay? So as we move into that level, I want to pay attention to that, see what type of price action when we get, and see what the market does. The other area is this overlap. The 131.20, 131 area, I'll just call it. That's an overlap. So that overlap means that there's two different fair value gaps meeting at that spot, which is an area of confluence because that's where there's likely a lot of stacked sell orders, positioned by, the institutions, and they're pushing price into that level to trigger their sells. Okay. So we saw that massive move up um, on NVIDIA. That's a little bit ahead of where we are right now. But anyway, we opened up at pre-market, just below pre-market high, or I'm sorry, not pre-market high, previous day high. And we wanted to see what was going to happen when we opened up. Okay. So we opened up and we saw a pretty big move to the upside, created a bullish fair value gap on NVIDIA. Okay, and I marked that out once I saw that. So I know that if I go short on QQQ, I know that this could be an area where I would, potentially look to take profit, where you can see a bounce on NVIDIA, and that could, of course, affect QQQ. So I marked this out on my chart. All right, that's number one. All right. So there's my bullish fair value gap on NVIDIA, and I'm going to continue to watch NVIDIA. Now I was watching Apple also. Was specifically looking for Apple to like lose its 20-day simple moving average. I'm not going to really show Apple too much. I want to just kind of more focus on NVIDIA. Now, I just want to take a second to stop and pause for a second. Now, on StockTwits, I had mentioned this was my right before market open at 7:29, Mountain Time. I had mentioned that we had rejected a major fair value gap last night on ES, causing the downside, and the down move created a 1-hour bearish fair value gap, which we talked about. On SPY and QQQ, we're going to watch for a move up into the blue area, this overnight gap area, and then close below the median of the fair value gap for continuation lower. And I talked about market structure shift where we're creating lower lows and lower highs. So now I'll switch back over here. Now the market opens up. Okay, I'm going to slow down the speed here. Like I said, I had taken a couple trades on QQQ. I saw price move into this at 8:30. I'd taken some contracts here. We saw the move down. I had taken some more at 9 o'clock. Quick scalp positions, right? it wasn't until we started seeing NVIDIA move higher, right, that I started becoming interested in that bearish fair value gap. Now, let's kind of continue on here and move to, so here we are at 10 a.m. and at about that point is when we started to see NVIDIA just kind of go straight up, right? So let's kind of look at the anatomy, or let's watch what NVIDIA does. Comes back into this fair value gap, bounces off of it, and continues to move higher. But we can see that the market really isn't reacting to the same degree as NVIDIA is. It came back into this fair value gap, started to move higher, and I wanted to be careful on taking shorts because if NVIDIA is, continues to be strong, there's a good chance that QQQ is going to follow. Okay. Um, so let's go back to QQQ. Now we made this move down here into at 1010. We moved into this fair value gap. I had taken most of my contracts off once we moved into this fair value gap, and I had mentioned that if you're in short, to make sure you take profits. Somewhere in here, I had mentioned that you got to take profits because the thing here is if you're in short, you got to know what the levels where price can bounce off of. So I was targeting this area here, took a few contracts off, and then we're going to continue to watch uh, NVIDIA move higher. So NVIDIA is just kind of moving straight up now. Let me have NVIDIA kind of catch up to where we are. Now, as we start approaching this, we're getting closer. We're only, $2 away. Now I'm becoming very, very interested um, in NVIDIA. Okay. So uh, here is where I started to take some more contracts on QQQ. All right. So now, where are we at right now? First off, NVIDIA is moving up higher into this bearish fair value gap. Now, I know that this can create some major selling pressure, okay, on NVIDIA and on QQQ. But where are we at on SPY and QQQ? Well, we're still in this fair value gap. Same thing with ES. We're still in this bearish fair value gap, right? We're starting to see a lot of volume, right? We see a very big major volume spike there on the 1 minute chart, and same thing here. Does that mean anything? Well, it all depends on where we are. We're in a bearish fair value gap. We're seeing a lot of extremely high volume bars in the bearish fair value gap, which can imply heavy selling. But here is where it became pretty significant. So I'm going to switch to the 2 minute, and we're going to look at the right about here. So let's pay attention to this. We noticed that here's the candles that really told me something. Okay. So we bounced off of this bullish fair value gap on SPY. Okay. We know that there's an area that could hold the market up. Okay. And it did temporarily. We moved back up into the median of the fair value gap on QQQ, right? So this is a very key area. What I noticed and where I said I'm going to take some QQQ puts somewhere around 10, taking a few on QQQ at 1028. Why? Here's why. Look at this candle here, right? We saw this somewhat large candle back into the median of the fair value gap. Now, why do I keep mentioning the median? Why is that so important? The median is typically where price will see reactions on bullish fair value gaps and bearish fair value gaps. We'll see a lot of reactions at that particular area. If we look at the volume on this candle, there's no volume here. This is this small green volume bar here. No volume. So that's a low volume move. That's what I refer to those as anomalies. Look at the very next candle. This rejection candle, right? This is just a rejection candle. And look at the amount of volume. Look at the size of this candle, right? It starts at 54, goes up to the 90. It's a 50-cent candle with this low volume. And then look how much volume this candle has. What does that tell me? Well, there is a lot of selling pressure here in this area. Okay, now then we had a couple of the candles. We moved higher on low volume. Again, look at this candle. It's got a green volume bar. And then this one here, we see another rejection candle. We're holding price underneath of that median. Okay, so this candle here at 1021, I can see on this 5-minute candle, we're rejecting, we're holding, we're holding underneath this median. Now, experience, just experience with seeing this type of behavior, this type of selling, or this type of trading activity and volume at these key areas gave me reason to take a shot at going short here. All right, so at 1028, I had posted that I was going to take a few QQQ puts because of the high volume that I see in this area. The 1 minute shows extremely high volume in this area. There's more so on the 2 minute. I think the 3 minute had some extremely high volume too. So that's what gave me reason to take a shot at taking a short position there on QQQ. Okay. Now, I went short. Meanwhile, NVIDIA is just still moving higher, right? So I'm going to kind of catch us up to where we are. All right, we're moving higher. So we're about 1028, 1030 right here. Okay. Now, we move down. And that was a nice little trade. Okay. Wasn't a huge trade, but I'm still holding on to my QQQ contracts here because as NVIDIA is moving up into this level, I want to wait to see what happens here. I have no reason to sell out of my position because, you know, uh, you know, I'm well aware of where we are in the market. We've failed to move higher, and we're essentially just, trending down. If we look at the trend, we're essentially trending downward, right? So if we continue to hold this trend, there's no reason for me to get scared out of my position, right? I'm well aware of where we are. Now, if we start to see buying pressure, or we start to, if we clear this previous, swing high, then I would sell out of my contracts, right? Because then we could start to see market structure shift and price move higher. But I would still wait to see what happened at this gap area. So let's continue on higher. Let's continue on and see what we do. So we are kind of holding this trend line. We move down again. Now what do? We move down into this here. I've taken some contracts off, right? Because any quick move to the downside, I want to secure profits, right? Because price can bounce right in my face because I know that this is an area where, the market can hold and push price to the upside. Now we're at about 1133 or so. And I had taken a shot on NVIDIA at 1044. Why? So here's the rationale behind this trade. So if we look at this particular candle here, we can see that all the trading activity was here up here at the 129.57. Okay, on pretty high volume in comparison relative to the previous candles. And I took a shot. I took a small position here. All right, and price continued to move a little higher. I was looking to add up in this area if I saw selling activity. Otherwise, I would just get out of my position. But I'm actively watching what NVIDIA is doing here, right? So I kind of created like a line here because I wanted to see if NVIDIA can get over that. Why do I put the line there? Because that's where all the trading activity is. So I'll make this yellow because each kind of line I use represents something different. These red lines are usually for the medians of fair value gaps or overnight gaps. So I want to see if we can get over that. Okay, so that went a little too fast. Let me kind of back up a little bit. So we failed to get over that. Now, I liked to see the fact that on the 15-minute chart, we failed to get over that level. So I held my position. I had no reason to sell my position on my NVIDIA puts. I want to see what can happen there. Um, so we're at like around 11:15. We move back into this fair value gap on SPY. All right, I want to see price break below this. Okay, now what am I thinking at this point in time? We're continuing to trend to the downside. We're making new lower lows. Okay, as you can see that we broke the previous low. So we're making new lower lows, lower highs and lower lows. That's a trend. That's a downward trend. But in order to see downside, we have to break this 570. Are we going to break it? Well, I don't really know at that point. We need to see something to accelerate the market. Now, this is what we want to talk about here. We need some fuel to be added into the market to increase selling. So I ask, what is going to create additional selling pressure in the market? What's going to add fuel to the fire? We're already in a bearish fair value gap on across the market, right? We're moving out of it on ES, but we're kind of still in it on SPY. But the point is that what is going to create additional downside? Is it just going to come out of nowhere? Well, if we want to see the downside, we know that NVIDIA is going into this fair value gap. Will it make it in there? We don't know, but let's wait to see and find out. We're aggressively moving to it. Okay, we can see that this is, NVIDIA is just moving straight up. Are we going to get there? Well, I'm going to say probably so. Why? Because the way I think is that the market trades from level to level. We were in one level, we're moving to another level. So my thought is, if we're in a bearish fair value gap right now, okay, and we're trending downward, and I have QQQ puts, I'm going to continue to hold on to them because I want to see what happens at this 4-hour fair value gap. Because if we do reject this fair value gap, the market is going to move to the downside pretty significantly. And that's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm hoping for. And what I want to see if that's what we get. In StockTwits, I'm mentioning to folks, here is the level. Now, I had mentioned the rationale for taking the NVIDIA. I basically the same thing I just put on the chart here. This yellow area, this is where all the trading activity was. Watch out for the move on with NVIDIA. So I had mentioned that we'll take off a few of my runners if it closed above the latest high, and we didn't. And I had mentioned that we were moving into this fair value gap on NVIDIA here. All right, I want to see us break 570 with volume. Okay, and if you're shorts, just be sure to take risk off. So if we're in this gap, fair value gap, this bullish fair value gap, make sure you're taking profit. It can bounce. We may not even reach the NVIDIA fair value gap. So at this point in time, we have to de-risk our positions. We have to trade smart. Trade smart meaning if we're in an area that can create an upside move, we have to be able to take our take profit, secure our profit, so that price doesn't bounce in our face, and then we're now in a losing position. The main thing at this point in time is that I want to see price move into the bearish fair value gap on NVIDIA. All right, so I'm mentioning here we're moving into the 4-hour fair value gap. So those that are in long and QQQ, SPY, and NVIDIA, I highly encourage you to watch the 130.30 area. Don't FOMO into this level. In my opinion, right now is not the time to buy calls as we approach this area. And this will help the QQQ short. So I'm in the QQQ short right now. We want to see 570 break and be prepared. So I'm just letting traders know that it's not a good idea to buy calls blindly. There's absolutely no reason. I'm not really sure why you'd want to buy calls here. If you did, this isn't to take a shot at anyone, but there's just no reason to take calls right now. Well, you can say, well, hey, why wouldn't we take calls? Because we're in a bullish fair value gap. Yeah, but that means you're longing into a already known to be an area that has selling pressure. We're trending downward intraday, so there's no reason for us to be buying calls. If you have that mindset, you have to change the mindset, because the mindset is, well, the market's moving down. Let's buy calls to catch the move to the upside. That, in my opinion, is not the right way we want to look at the market. We don't want to catch a falling knife. We don't want to just catch a bounce. We got to trade the trend. The trend is we're trending downward. We can see there's this downward trend and we're holding that trend. We're making lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. So we don't want to buy calls here. Not to mention we're already moving into a bearish fair value gap. Does that mean that we're going to reject there? No, we don't know what's going to happen. We have to wait to see what happens. So we move into that level. Now we move into that level. But I want to just take a step back because I want to actually talk about something here. Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. We can keep it here. We move into that level. How do we move into that level? Well, we moved down. I just moved it forward a little bit. We moved down into this fair value gap and look what we did. On SPY, we have this fair value gap. Look what happened. Price came down into this area to grab some liquidity, right? Because at the same time, as I'm watching this, QQQ was kind of just hanging around in this area, right? What does it take for price to move into this area? Well, the market needs a little fuel, okay? Like we talked about, it needs something that's going to push price into this area. Let's talk about this, and let's think about the psychology behind this. Big money wants price to go into this area. Big money is trying to push price into this fair value gap because there's orders sitting there waiting to get filled. Okay, so we need something to add fuel to the market. How does that happen? Well, we just push price back down into this area, into this SPY bullish fair value gap, and it temporarily pushes price up, and we moved up. And literally this candle right here at 11:57, you can see right here at 11:45, it's 11:47, it's the same time frame, is where we got the move up. All right, so we got the liquidity we needed. We pushed up. We came into this area, and then we started to see the selling pressure. Now, look at this candle right here. If we take a step back on the 3-minute chart, this candle right here has the most amount of volume the entire day, right? Now, is that a very big move? No, not really. But why do we have so much volume? Well, because we moved into a bearish fair value gap. Now, is that a bullish candle or a bearish candle? Oh, it's a bullish candle, but it's like touching a hot stove. It's extremely hot. Why? Because look at all the volume, right? This type of volume should have created a massive candle. It should have created a massive size candle based on the size of this or the amount of volume. This is like 2.3 million shares traded, right? This should have created a massive candle. The fact that it didn't, I know that tells me that there's got to be a lot of selling in there. Okay. So what do? We go up in there. I add to my position because I started to see all the selling pressure on the low time frame on that 3-minute. I added to my position on NVDA. I started to see the move down on the low time frames. Okay, and then that's what brought the downside. We needed that fuel. So let's kind of explain here what happened. Price was hanging around this bearish fair value gap while NVIDIA moves to the upside. Okay, we moved down into this bullish fair value gap to add some liquidity because the market needs to push up into that level. They're intentionally trying to push price up into that level because there's orders sitting there waiting to get filled. Now, me being in a QQQ put, I'm expecting that by us moving into this bearish fair value gap on NVIDIA is going to add selling pressure to the market. What's holding price from going anywhere? This fair value gap on SPY. This is what's holding us up. I need that to break. How's that going to break? By adding fuel now with an NVIDIA downside move. Do we get it? We sure do. There it is. And that's exactly what we were looking for. And then what do we do on QQQ and SPY? Well, we break this finally with volume. Okay. We can look at this on the lower time frame. We see that it finally breaks on volume, 5-minute, I believe. Yep. Well, increasing volume. We break it finally, and then we just continue to trend to the downside. Awesome trade. Awesome trade. it all came down to the NVIDIA move. And that's exactly what we were looking for. And we can see in StockTwits that market was grabbing liquidity by pushing SPY into the bullish fair value gap. It fueled NVIDIA, so it allowed some buying to move up into the bearish fair value gap, and we saw the downside move. And that's essentially what we needed for that downside continuation to continue, and NVIDIA, continued down to on the downside move. I'm still holding NVIDIA puts right now. I had 0 DTE QQQ puts that I had held on to. I had taken off a couple here on previous day low on QQQ and SPY because that's really the target. I actually had 468 as my target. We broke right through that. So I held on to a few more, and then I ended up selling my remaining ones and called it a day. But it was ended up being a great trade. Um, I wanted to specifically focus on this, not on my scalp trades off of the overnight gap, is because that was insignificant. The focus was on NVIDIA. Why am I not focusing on that so much? Well, there's this idea that NVIDIA, Apple may not necessarily influence the market. And if you trade SPY, QQQ, like NVIDIA doesn't have anything to do with it. I talk about this all the time. Yes, I look at SPY, QQQ, ES, and Q to guide my trades because if I see confluence across the 4, across 2 or 3, that helps me with my trades. But you got to add NVIDIA into that too. It's very, very clear that NVIDIA is a heavy influencer in the market. Apple is as well. It's the top holdings of QQQ and NASDAQ, but I'm really focusing on NVIDIA because that really is what drives the market in a way that people don't really understand. And we can clearly see here today, once we moved into that fair value gap, we saw massive selling, and it's sold off the market. It was a fantastic trade. It actually moved a little bit lower than I was expecting it to, uh, but and I could have held for a little bit more, but I had to get in the office. I had some work I had to get done, so I didn't really want to manage my position um, while I wasn't paying attention to the chart. So in any event, uh, you know, this was a great trade today. We've mitigated all of these fair value gaps on SPY, so these become is insignificant right now. Now with this downside move, we've created new bearish fair value gaps that we can look for trades tomorrow. So in any event, I hope this video is very insightful and helpful on what I was looking at, what I was looking for. When we are in these bearish fair value gaps or bullish fair value gaps, I'm always looking at the 15-minute time frame. I've mentioned before I have two screens that I'm looking at. I have my 15-minute chart set up across the board, and then I have another monitor where I have the same charts, but I'm looking at lower time frames. I'm kind of cycling through different ones. What do I see? I want to be able to see underneath the hood to see what's going on. So if I like to take my trading decisions and I use the 15-minute because that's ultimately telling me what I need to see, and I can make trading decisions based off of that. But sometimes I also take trades off of what I see in the lower time frames also because the 15-minute has to correlate with what I see in the lower time frames. And if I see selling pressure in the 15-minute, I see a bearish candle in the 15-minute when I'm looking to go short, and I see the same thing on the lower time frames, then it helps, that adds to the confidence in me taking that trade. But really what was important is when we were in this bearish fair value gap on QQQ, we started to see all this, this high volume spikes. Those are clues, and that happens a lot. I take a lot of trades off of that, off of seeing those high volume spikes in key areas on the low time frames, the 1 minute, the 2 minute. Now, Do they always go as planned, or do they always work out with based on what I'm seeing? I say more often than not, but there are times where I do see high volume spikes, but price will, move to the opposite direction, and I fail to read something that, would have given me reason not to take the trade. But in this particular case, we were trending downward. We were right at the trend line, and we see this high volume spikes on the lower time frame, which I was willing to take a shot, and it ended up working out. NVIDIA moved into the fair value gap, which accelerated the trade or added fuel to the market to bring the downside, and that's ultimately what we need to kind of keep our eye on. So if you're learning to trade the fair value gap, pay attention to the edge of the fair value gaps when price just first enters them. See if we see immediate reactions there. If price moves into them, keep an eye on the median, because the median is very important. And that's an area, that specific area, the median of a fair value gap. You know, Pay attention to the low time frames and look for rejection candles if it's a bearish fair value gap under high volume. Uh, doesn't mean that it's okay to just take a short trade when you see a bearish um, candle at the median of a bearish fair value gap on extremely high volume. Just make sure that everything aligns, right? Um, that's what really matters. It's all about confluence, and really what it comes down to is, as traders, right? We have to find it's all about probability, right? So we have to look for the highest probability setups. We need to look for high probability trades, and that's where the confluence comes in. When you see price moving into a bearish fair value gap on NVIDIA, and you see the selling pressure come in, then that as long as that aligns with what you're looking at on SPY or QQQ or whatever it is that you trade, ES if you're trading futures, and it all aligns together, you just got to be confident in what you see. I had mentioned on Stock Twits that I had no reason to sell out of my position as Nvidia's moving up, right? Despite Nvidia moving up, we're trending downward. And that was a sign to me that, well, Nvidia just wants to go into this bearish fair value gap to add the fuel and accelerate the selling. And we're trading, if we're trending downward and we're in a bearish fair value gap, all it's going to do is just add fuel to that and create that additional downside that we're looking for. And that's exactly what happened. So anyway, again, hope this video was very insightful, very helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, like the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.